In a crowded courtroom, where the weight of silence was almost tangible, a 10-year-old boy stood up, his hands trembling by his sides. In that moment, his words would send shockwaves through the entire room, leaving everyone, including the judge, completely stunned. The stillness in the courtroom was so intense that the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock was almost deafening. Every breath seemed to be drawn in unison, holding on to the tension. Judge Thomas Wexler, a figure known for his stern and unyielding demeanor, sat high on his bench. His expression was unreadable as he flipped through the final pages of the case file before him. This wasn't just any ordinary custody battle, it was a case that had dominated the town's headlines for months. Reporters, legal experts, and curious onlookers had all been waiting for this moment, eager to witness the final ruling. On one side of the room sat Danielle Carter, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly together on the table. Once a loving and devoted mother, she now found herself painted as a reckless and manipulative parent by her ex-husband's legal team. She barely glanced at her son, who sat between the opposing lawyers, his small hands gripping the edges of his chair as if it were the only thing anchoring him. Across from her, Gregory Miles sat with an air of quiet arrogance. He had spent the past several months fighting tooth and nail for full custody of his son, claiming that Danielle was unfit to care for him. His attorney had painted a flawless picture of Gregory as the stable, responsible father, someone who would do anything to protect his child from the alleged neglect his mother had shown. Yet, behind the mask of confidence, there was a subtle tension in his jaw, a rigidity in his shoulders, betraying the nervous energy beneath. Judge Wexler lifted his gavel slightly, signaling that he was ready to make his ruling. The courtroom fell into a thick silence, the air heavy with anticipation. Danielle inhaled sharply, her breath catching in her chest. Gregory leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the judge. The attorneys on both sides sat still, their focus unwavering, waiting for the final decision. But just as the gavel was about to come down, a small, trembling voice shattered the stillness. "Wait!" Gasps rippled through the courtroom as all eyes turned to the back of the room. A young boy, no older than 10, stood up. His face was flushed with emotion, his small fists clenched by his sides, his eyes filled with a mixture of urgency and determination. "That's not what happened," he said, his voice surprisingly clear, though it wasn't loud. It carried through the room, cutting through the tension like a knife. Danielle's face drained of color, her hands shaking slightly. Gregory froze, his fingers tight against the edge of the table, his body tense with a mix of confusion and anger. Even Judge Wexler, known for his stern and no-nonsense approach, hesitated. His usual commanding tone softened as he addressed the boy. "Step forward, son," he instructed, his voice still firm but now carrying a note of uncertainty. The boy, his name revealed to be Liam Miles, swallowed hard, his small steps echoing softly against the polished floor as he moved to the front of the courtroom. Everyone watched, captivated, as he stood there, the weight of the room's gaze pressing down on him. Judge Wexler's sharp eyes never left the boy as he adjusted his glasses and asked, "What do you mean, Liam?" Liam hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering between his parents, one pale and silent, the other frozen, a statue of unreadable emotion. But then, with a deep breath, he squared his shoulders and spoke. "They lied," Liam said firmly, his voice growing steadier with each word. "They both lied." The words hit the courtroom like a hammer shattering glass. Whispers erupted, but the judge raised a hand, silencing the crowd. Liam continued, his small voice carrying more strength than anyone had expected. "The stories they told about each other, none of it's true. They made things up to make themselves look better, but they forgot about me." A wave of disbelief washed over everyone in the room. Danielle's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Gregory's jaw tightened, his breathing becoming more labored. Judge Wexler leaned forward, his voice lowering to a more serious tone. "Liam, what exactly did they lie about?" Liam swallowed, his small fingers curling into the hem of his oversized sweater. He looked young, fragile, but in that moment, his voice carried a weight that made even the most seasoned legal professionals sit up straighter. "They told you that Mom doesn't take care of me," Liam began, his voice cracking slightly but still steady. But that's not true. She's not perfect, but she loves me. She's the one who stays up with me when I can't sleep. She's the one who makes me soup when I'm sick. She's the one who helps me with my nightmares." He took a shaky breath, his voice gaining strength. "But my dad forgets about me. He said he'd pick me up from school, but he never came. He said he'd come to my soccer game, but he was too busy with." Liam hesitated, glancing up at his father before continuing. "With his girlfriend." A ripple of shock spread through the courtroom. Danielle's eyes widened with disbelief. Even the bailiff raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. Gregory let out a hollow laugh, trying to dismiss the accusation, but Liam wasn't done. "I saw you," Liam said, his voice cutting through his father's defense. "You were supposed to be with me, but you were with her." Gregory's mouth snapped shut. He couldn't find the words to defend himself. For the first time, Judge Wexler allowed the courtroom to absorb the gravity of the moment, his eyes never leaving the boy. "Liam," the judge said, his voice calm yet firm, "you said your father lied about your mother, but what about you? What did he lie about you?" Liam hesitated before responding, his hands twisting together in front of him. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "He told me to say that I wanted to live with him. He said if I told you that, everything would be easier. He said I wouldn't have to hear them fight anymore. He said I wouldn't have to see Mom cry." The weight of his words dropped like a bomb in the courtroom. Danielle gasped, her breath coming in sharp, choked sobs. Gregory's face turned pale as he shifted in his seat, his body language betraying his shock and regret. Judge Wexler's gaze grew colder as he focused on Gregory, who now looked like a man on the edge of losing everything. "Mr. Miles, do you have a response to these claims?" Gregory's voice wavered as he opened his mouth, but no words came out. His entire defense, his carefully constructed narrative, had crumbled in front of him. "I may have said some things to him," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "But only because I thought." "No," Liam cut him off, his voice rising. "You made me feel like I had no choice. You told me I had to pick you, that Mom didn't deserve me. You made me lie about her, and I hated it." Gregory's face twisted in pain, shame, and guilt. The weight of his son's words hung heavily in the air. Judge Wexler turned to Gregory's attorney. "Counselor, you may want to prepare for an explanation as to why your client's testimony may have been fabricated." Gregory's lawyer sighed, already knowing the damage had been done. And with that, the courtroom awaited the final ruling. But before the judge could make his decision, a surprising turn of events occurred. Danielle's lawyer stood up, holding a folder in his hand. "I have proof," he said, his voice steady. Gregory's face turned white as the lawyer presented text messages between Gregory and Liam, messages that further corroborated Liam's claims of being coerced. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of the evidence overwhelming. Judge Wexler's eyes scanned the documents. "This changes everything," he muttered, as the room seemed to shrink under the strain of the truth that had been uncovered. Finally, the judge turned back to Gregory. "Mr. Miles, based on your son's testimony and your own admission, I'm revisiting the custody arrangements. The court must now consider whether you are fit to have joint custody at all." Gregory, desperate, pleaded, "Please, Your Honor, he's just a kid. He doesn't understand." Liam, now with his mother, squeezed her hand tightly as she whispered softly to him. "We're okay now. We really are." Gregory sat frozen, his face pale, as the judge's voice broke through the tension. "Primary custody will be awarded to Miss Carter. Mr. Miles, you will have supervised visitation until this court determines your fitness for unsupervised visits." The gavel came down with finality. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, but Gregory remained silent, staring at the table in front of him. As the crowd began to disperse, Danielle and Liam walked out together, hand in hand. And for the first time, Liam looked back at his father not with fear but with a quiet strength that spoke volumes. Judge Wexler's final words resonated long after the gavel had fallen. In a custody battle, the most important person in the room was often forgotten: the child. This case wasn't about winning, it was about what was truly best for the child. As the room cleared, the echoes of the truth hung heavy in the air, a reminder that no matter how tightly lies are woven, the truth will always find its way out.